happened, even poo-poo comes out. The other poo-poo's out, and then they eat the poo-poo.
Well, I was just sitting there with my bottle brown, gulping loads and swallowing chodes as I drift from town to town. Libido's got it so that I'm eating lots of buds. All I've got to show for it is the giardia in my gut.
Faggot!
Sucking some cock, sucking some cock. Sucking some cock, sucking some cock. Sucking some cock, sucking some cock. Sucking some cock, sucking some cock.
Juicy stuff undulating.
Fucking quiz!
So that song signifies the start of a new segment on this program called Poser Watch, which I have liberally absconded with from Diablos 88, which is a good podcast you should be listening to. They do a Poser Watch, and now I do as well. So first Poser Watch goes out to Metal Sucks and their apparent toady, at least in this instance, Mr. Brock Dorsey of deathmetal.org, who spread false rumors that Dagon from the great band Inquisition was a pedophile. Turns out, if you watch the new Razorfist video on it, not so much. I'm not even a big fan of the Razorfist guy, but he did some really good research on this, and these niggas was faking the funk, trying to slander a great musician and songwriter, so fuck them.
Fuck you, you fucking goddamn degenerate fucks!
Anyways, this week, in the spirit of me liberally absconding with a theme from another podcast, I'm also going to revive a theme from an old metal magazine. Decibel, who used to be respectable but have since turned into liberal fruitcakes, they used to do a segment called Defend Your Shitty Taste, where they would take an album that they thought was good, that the metal scene at large thought was shitty. So for example, the fourth Autopsy album, one of the writers over at Decibel might like it, and they'd have to defend it, say, well, you guys are wrong, and this is why it's good. Also, that fourth Autopsy album actually is really good. But this week, I'm going to be looking at two Black Sabbath albums, Technical Ecstasy and Never Say Die. So there's kind of a narrative with Black Sabbath that they did some great albums in the early 70s, fell off around Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, if you ask people like Hank Rollins, who thinks that only the first four Black Sabbath albums are good.
I think masculinity is dumb. That's why I make tough guy faces and lift weights and stuff. I'll kick your ass if you like masculinity.
So yeah, no, Black Sabbath wimped out after Volume 4, even though Sabotage in particular is like their heaviest album. I mean, have you heard Symptom of the Universe, one of the most important songs involved in inventing thrash metal? But anyways, that particular narrative is easily debunked, and I think most mainstream metalheads are aware that it's nonsense. But the prevailing mainstream metalhead opinion on the Black Sabbath discography is that after Sabotage, that would be album number 6, Black Sabbath took a dump for 2 albums until Dio came back and rescued them with Heaven and Hell. And this is obviously just nonsense if you listen to Technical Ecstasy, and particularly Never Say Die, as I will now demonstrate. So here's the first thing you hear on Technical Ecstasy. So immediately we're struck with an excellent proto-thrash metal riff. And keep in mind, this is 1978, with a really epic Iommi lead over it. So I'm failing to see what the problem with this album is. It grabs you by the balls in the first few seconds. So, like, what's the issue there? But then Black Sabbath really turns up the prog rock influences they picked up around the time of Volume 4 and especially Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. See, around then, Mr. Iommi was hanging out a lot with Rick Wakeman from Yes, because Mr. Wakeman had a bit of a falling out with the other Yes guys during the recordings of, what the fuck is that album called? The one that came out after Close to the Edge. He thought that one was pretentious, so he hung out with the metal dudes in Sabbath, even contributed a lot of piano solos and keyboardy shit, and it really rubbed off on them to the point where they were incorporating a lot of progressive rock type stuff into their music, as you will now hear in this synth hit. So here's that lead melody being used as a chorus, and then watch this crazy grinding 70s synth, glorious. And it's still like heavy, you know? It's not fruity. And then this riff and the way that Ozzy's using his vocals here actually foreshadows a lot of what he would do on Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman. So the whole argument that Technical Ecstasy was like an evolutionary dead end doesn't even make sense, because the roots of what both Ozzy in his solo project and Black Sabbath and their later albums are clearly present there. So it's like, shut up, you're dumb. But the standout track on this album is the closer, Dirty Women, which I'm willing to bet we can guess what that's about.
You fucking whore.
So, total doom metal intro riff with tastefully done organs. Very atmospheric lyrics from Geezer Butler. Remember, Geezer wrote the fucking lyrics, not Ozzy. Sharon can get fucked, but not by me, because that bitch is gross. Nice crescendo coming up. So you can kind of tell where that's going. They alternate between that sort of down-tempo doom metal riff with the organs and that more crescendo type rising action riff with the lead guitar over it. But eventually it builds up to a turnaround worthy of Merciful Fate that also includes a riff that you might recognize from some more overrated later bands that ripped it off pretty hard in the 80s. Spooky intro. I like it. Uh-oh. Oh, hi, Iron Maiden. Is that the Aces High riff in fucking 1978? Bruce Dickinson and company blown the fuck out. And then here's the big Merciful Fate style conclusion. Check that riff out. It's a classic Sabbath riff. No, they do not, Mr. Osborne. They do not mess around, in fact. So, that song in particular, at least, seems to have gained a minor following among more enlightened Black Sabbath fans, to the point where, when I saw them live on their farewell tour, they actually played that song, and I kind of flipped my shit, because I was really fucking excited. Technical Ecstasy in general, however, is still highly overlooked and shat upon, because it doesn't fit the narrative I outlined earlier, where Black Sabbath was great, then they got shitty, and then Dio rescued them. That's not what happened. You heard all that music. That was good stuff, you know? But Never Say Die, that album is even more shat upon than Technical Ecstasy, and I cannot, well, I'm not going to say I cannot for the life of me understand why, because I know that people are stupid and they just want to buy into narratives and use that kind of a priori construct to sort through discography so they don't have to actually think about the music they're listening to. But no, Never Say Die is in fact even better than Technical Ecstasy, as I will now demonstrate. So, we have a song like Junior's Eyes, which is still very heavy, but it also takes Black Sabbath's sound to new places, as you will see, or hear, rather. So check that out. Tony's doing ambient stuff, little texture variances with the guitar, while Geezer is carrying the main melody of the song, Geezer Butler, the bassist. This is actually an extrapolation of a beneath the surface element of Black Sabbath, in that Tony would hit a big riff and then Geezer would do little melodic arabesques in response to it. Now they've completely gone with that dichotomy where the riffs were simple and the bass was more complex, to let Geezer take over as the lead melodic voice, and then Tony Iommi is dancing around it. So it's a clever inversion, but also an extrapolation. And here is our big heavy riffs. You can hear Tony Also beefing up the sound in the background with those soft guitar leads, adding to the drama of this big heavy climax. Classic Sabbath riffs. Why don't people like this? And then watch this transition right here. Total heavy riff with really cool cymbal work from Bill Ward, who is one of the great metal drummers. And then, obviously, Tony Iommi's leads are always great. I mean, that's not really up for debate. I would think everybody's accepted that as an established fact at this point. So yes, that was Junior's Eyes, a song written about, I want to say, Ozzy's father actually died while they were recording this, which led to a lot of intra-band tension, and it came out in a beautiful eulogy in that song. Another great song on this album is Shockwave, which, rather than doing the whole loud, soft, delicate, hard dichotomy that you heard in Junior's Eyes, it goes right for the jugular with an amorphous barrage of riffs. There we go, nice, happy but still heavy riff with a singular Tony Iommi lead guitar over it. There we go, good Geezer lyrics too. Ghostly shadows from the other world, evil forces in your mind. Here we go. That's some heavy shit. Great groove riff, and then watch what the vocals do here. So, Ozzy experimenting with some new vocal styles, a bit of a almost Creedence Clearwater Revival type wordless background vocal, and then he takes over the lead. I think that's actually the band doing backing vocals there. I know they do it on other parts, and in fact on this album Bill Ward even sings on the last song, and it sounds pretty good. So you get to hear some stuff you haven't heard Black Sabbath do before, but it's still very much Sabbath. As alluded to earlier, Black Sabbath was incorporating a lot more progressive rock influence onto the albums in their latter half of the 70s, and this hit a fever pitch on Never Say Die. It's their proggiest album by far, even including the albums that came after it. For instance, the song Air Dance, which I will now play an excerpt of, features a full-on Yes style, even a bit of King Crimson synth guitar trade-off / breakdown. That's pretty sick. Check out that piano.
Hey, that's pretty good.
Shredding!
Fucking dang, dude.
So yeah, really good interplay between virtuosic keyboards and shredding guitars with some nice jazzy drumming under it. Oh, that fucking keyboard line that just came in. So good. Perfect way to close out the album and to close out my discussion and defense of these two misaligned albums that were wrongfully slandered, much in the same way that Dagon was by Brock Dorsey and the Metal Sucks crew. So what does this have to do with anything? Well, for one, go get these two albums, especially Never Say Die. Listen to them right now. But also, beware of applying a priori narratives to complex concepts, because you'll miss out on good stuff like these two Black Sabbath albums. Also, said narratives are often promulgated by those who possess ulterior motives. For instance, with Black Sabbath, the original narrative, up until right around when Dio came back and then later passed away was that Black Sabbath's early albums were good. They got shitty in the 70s and then just vanished. Even the Dio albums weren't good. But Dio was a beloved metal figure, and he passed away before, or rather after, going on a very lucrative reunion tour with Black Sabbath. So then they had to modify the narrative to include Dio within the larger Black Sabbath concept. Also, Technical Ecstasy and Never Say Die were mostly written by Mr. Iommi with minimal input from other band members, particularly in the case of Technical Ecstasy. So these albums are going to be ignored by Ozzy and Sharon Incorporated, who are trying to push this whole Ozzy is Black Sabbath thing to make money. So there's metalheads out there that fell into this trap of ignoring certain Black Sabbath albums just because they didn't fit a narrative, not realizing that they were just helping to line the pockets and bolster the egos of Sharon and Ozzy at the expense of the real songwriter Tony Iommi. Similarly, you might have run into normies who are just trying to be, nice to everyone, get along with everybody, and so they go out of their way to, like shit on white people and say that they're so oppressive, and then you show them things that demonstrate this isn't the case, and rather than take these new pieces of information in and try to create their own new narrative that accounts for all the facts in the world, they instead react violently and cling to their original narrative, which results in the disintegration of society. So, larger context, don't just cling to the wisdom of crowds.
That's about all. Peace out.